You know, Ernest Hemingway was a war hero who went and killed a bunch of Nazis and then came back and became a literary genius and wrote all these different poems. That's what men used to be. Men used to be tough. They used to go to war. They used to kill. They used to go hard. They used to do all that and then still wrote literary pieces.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to the Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nikki Ballou, and we have a very special guest, a fellow Iranian. He's an Iranian American. I'm an Iranian Canadian. Abteen Vaziri. Welcome to the show, Abteen.
Nikki, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. I was just with another Iranian American from Canada right before this, so it's a pleasure. And I don't even know if you know, my cousins are Canadian. They live in Vancouver.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't know that. Now I know. That's fantastic. So listen, reason that I asked you to come on the show is because I've been following some of your content on Instagram in particular, and you are a man who pulls no punches, stands up for what's right. God bless you for doing that. Maybe start by telling us a little bit about your personal story.
Sure. You know, it's I'm sure you're dealing with that yourself as someone that's of Iranian descent.
Yeah.
It's been an emotional few months, and one of the reasons I actually decided to run for office, which I've never been a politician, I decided the day the filing was due, December 8th. Girlfriend, who hopefully soon to be wife, was Venezuelan, and I'm Iranian. And I told my campaign manager, also a friend from law school, that his name is Adam. I said, Adam, I think something's going to give. I think there's going to be some freedoms coming, and I think President Trump's going to start with Venezuela and Iran, and President Trump's going to be gone in 3 years, and we need more leaders. We need more people to kind of row in the same direction. Having a free world and freeing people of the world from tyranny is a goal we all should strive for. It's not a good time for me to run for office, but I need to run for office. And I have an interesting story myself. My father was in the Air Force in Iran, did all his training in the US, went back to Iran. I was born, and then 3 months after I was born, the revolution happened. He was court-martialed and they gave him a death sentence. And what actually saved his life was the Iran-Iraq war, because they needed him to serve. So they gave him a pardon to go serve in the war. And after the war ended, he got a fake passport, and he fled to Austria. And then me and my sisters and my mom, we fled to France, rendezvoused in Germany, and then finally came to the U.S. as political refugees in '91. And all of this stuff is coming back, given what's going on in Iran, how many people are getting killed, and it's been an emotional roller coaster for a lot of Iranians. But it's hard to go back to your normal routine in daily life when people are suffering, especially people from your birth country. So I feel like I have to speak up, and enough of us not being courageous and not talking. We all need to be courageous when people are going out and getting shot at unarmed. I need to just not hold back and say what's on my mind. That's the least I can do from a courage standpoint.
That's exactly how I feel. When I see our people, especially these young people, these children, honestly, who went out in January 8th, January 9th, before, after, with nothing but their bodies. And they stood in front of evil men with guns who mowed them down like wheat. And they showed that courage, and they kept coming out. I thought to myself, everyone tells me, man, no, don't talk. You can't be too political. You're going to tick some people off, say the corporate world. And I said, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. In fact, I wear it as a badge of honor, because the least I can do to honor those brave Iranians, least I can do is be their voice. When their voice is cut off by an evil Nazi-like regime, those of us whose voices are not cut off, I believe we have an obligation to stand up and speak, stand up and be counted. Because when I go to meet my maker is going to look at me and go, when it counted, where were you? And I want to be able to say, when it counted, I stood up, I spoke up, I didn't back down. And when our story was being slandered by the forces of the evil left, by the progressive racist left. I was one of the ones who pushed back. That's what it's like for me, anyways.
My father he passed away a couple of years ago, and he instilled a lot of the knowledge that he had in me, and obviously his values. But he used to always get so angry when Barbara Walters would interview the Shah and talk about political prisoners and people being tortured and a dictatorship, and there's this false narrative that Iran was a dictatorship. We had a monarchy. It wasn't a dictatorship. There was 1,500 political prisoners. By the way, those 1,500 political prisoners were people like Masoud Rajavi, Mariam Rajavi, Khomeini, Rafsanjani, the people who are killing people. Those are the political prisoners. They weren't political prisoners. They were enemies of humanity.
Yep.
And today, that same media is silent. When the Crown Prince was in Europe, the European media is complicit because they're new colonialist, and they, even though the British Empire basically shut down and left all those countries, they continued on with this new colonialist idea. And the way to do it is by having these weak governments that they put in place, and the mullahs are their government. So much adversity that we have to overcome, so much fake news, so much so many strong powers that don't want our people to be free, and it's now become evidenced. And we need to fight back. And it's tough because, they're trying to win information war.
They are. But there's one thing that they didn't count on. God is on our side. God is on our side. God wants this evil regime gone, and it will be gone, regardless of what these useful idiots of the left think. And here's the truth. The Crown Prince is a phenomenal unifying figure for the Iranian people. He's one who is brilliant. I mean, look at him. He speaks 4 languages super articulately. He's able to converse with these people. He's able to go back and forth and in a most brilliant way, knock back their specious, scummy arguments and make the point that needs to be made for the people of Iran. He's incredible. And then all the people that are stepping up in the diaspora to go out to the protests all over the major and minor cities of the world. There have been protests here in Toronto with over 350,000 people, 500,000 people. Protests in Vancouver with 200,000 people. In Washington, D.C., a couple 100,000 people. In Tehran, Los Angeles, 250,000 people. In Houston, 100,000 people. In Cologne, in Germany, 150,000 people. In Berlin, 200,000 people. All over the world, the Iranian diaspora is standing up and making its preferences known. In Iran, the people in the streets are chanting Reza Pahlavi's name. And these people that are trying to pretend that isn't the case are ridiculous. They're foolish. All we have to do is continue to speak, continue to fight, and continue to make sure that those that are sympathetic to our cause know about what's going on there, and they lock arms with us and move us forward. That's what I believe.
No, I agree with you. The media is really our biggest enemy. And the media, I mean, the UK media is just like, puts this false there. And by the way, the UK media, BBC is who was passing out Ayatollah Khomeini's tapes to help this regime getting power. And now they're doing everything in their power to make sure this regime survives. But, there's just so many stupid arguments. They're like, oh, are you a Mossad agent? Or, are you, one of the things, I was just on this other podcast with another amazing Canadian, by the way, and she was asking me all of the left's, talking points. It said, well, people in Iran, the youth may not, resonate with Reza Pahlavi. But one of the arguments that they have is that he hasn't been in Iran, 47 years, so he doesn't understand Iranians. Well, let me counter argument that. That's such a stupid argument. It's just an idiotic, stupid argument, right? Khomeini was exiled from Iran 15 years. Those same freaking lefties. Did they ever ask Khomeini, you were in Iran for 15 years. How do you know how Iranian people feel? You're not even Iranian. Most of your life, you were in Najaf. Your family's from India. They never asked him that question. Arakchi, his family's from Iraq. He tells the people, I'm the voice of the Iranian people. When he can barely speak Farsi, his English accent is an Iraqi, Arab English accent, and then he claims he's the voice of the Iranians. Yeah. The Shah of Iran was 22 years old when his father was forced to go into exile by the British and the Russians. Do you know where the Shah of Iran grew up? He grew up in Europe. Out of the 22 years of his life, probably 15 years of his life, he's in boarding school. He was educated in Europe, knew 6 languages. But you know what? In his heart belonged to Iran. When he came back to Iran, he loved Iran. And for 37 years, he modernized Iran to one of the best economies, one of the most powerful militaries in the world. And he didn't grow up in Iran. This crown prince, the first 21, 22 years of his life, he was educated in Iran. He's actually much more Iranian than his father was. In the last 47 years, it's not like he wanted to go live outside the U.S. He was forced out. He would be killed. He spent 47 years of his life dedicated to this cause of bringing freedom to the people of Iran. And the naysayers just have stupid argument after stupid argument after stupid argument. We're all Iranian. Our heart is in Iran. We're going to do what's right for Iran. He is more Iranian than these Iraqis and Indians and Syrians that are running the regime right now. These arguments are stupid. They don't work. They work for the uneducated mind. They don't work for the sophisticated mind.
Look, these leftists who try to Iran-splain what our lived experience is, what our understanding of our culture is, what our understanding of what the people of Iran know and think is, are a laughingstock. They're idiots. They don't know anything about anything. They just need to shut up. They need to shut the fuck up.
There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of money involved, and there's a lot of natural resources involved. And the colonial powers, the European colonial powers, just don't want to give up their power.
They don't.
That's just what it is. We unfortunately have to fight the left. We have to fight certain elements in the Republican Party that are, arguably being paid by foreign powers. We have to fight, the Russias of the world, the Chinas of the world, and some Middle Eastern countries like Turkey that are enriching themselves at the backs of the Iranian people. When I see a woman in Iran who's one of the richest countries in Iran digging through trash to feed her kids, when I see China stealing $23 million a day on underpriced oil from the people of Iran who are feeding their kids trash, those European powers, those Chinese powers, those Russian powers, the naysayers, the left, those people are all complicit to 45,000 people being murdered. Those people are complicit to that poor woman have to dig up trash to feed her kids while the Europeans and the Russians and the Chinese are stealing money from Iranian people. So every time they see that, I think about that woman that's eating out of the trash. And I tell the European powers and the European media and left media, go pound sand and take a hike because you have no idea what you're talking about. You're complicit in the genocide. You're complicit in people starving to death when they're sitting on one of the richest countries in the world.
1000%, brother. Now let's talk about the Candace Owens, the Tucker Carlsons of this world. I used to really like Tucker back in the day when he was on Fox News. I thought he was amazing. I thought the way that he spoke out against the left was so authentic, raw, and real. And then something happened. I don't quite know what, but the man
I know what happened.
Lost his marbles.
I know what happened. I mean, listen, let's draw inference, right? You have Dan Bazirian, you have Andrew Tate, you have Tucker Carlson, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then you have Candace Owens. All of them, all of a sudden, just went hardcore left. What do they all have in common? They all got fired. They got into financial trouble. They didn't have any money. And then all of a sudden, they're like, Israel is bad. Trump is bad. Somebody's paying them when they're broke. Dan Bazirian, his father was a corporate raider that stole like $600 million from Americans, gave up his citizenship and gave up his U.S. citizenship, became a St. Kitts citizen because he had a $62 million fine he had to pay to the SEC. So he left and hid that money, and Dan got some of that money and started playing poker. He had a company go bankrupt, started losing his money in poker. All of a sudden, he's broke, and then all of a sudden, he's got money, and then he's running for Congress, and he's against Israel. Who's paying him? That's the question we got to ask. Candace Owens didn't really have any money. All of a sudden, the Charlie Kirk happens, and then all of a sudden she's getting paid, and all of a sudden she's talking to the left. The same thing with Tucker. Tucker's having financial problems. He's fired from Fox. He doesn't have any money. All of a sudden he's got some big money, and then all of a sudden he's going. So, I mean, the writing's on the wall. We know what happened. The same thing with Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate was claimed he was a billionaire. He was broke. He was in prison. He was in prison in Romania. He was leaking out money. He didn't really have any money. The little money that he had spent. And all of a sudden, the rumors are that the UAE government gave him $100 million to convert to Islam and start promoting tourism and Islamism to UAE. It all adds up. Listen, these people, when you're Tucker Carlson in your 50s, you don't have a come to Jesus moment where you completely change your politics without something dramatic. Sometimes that happens when something dramatic happens in your life. You go to prison, somebody dies, you die, something.
That didn't happen to him.
Nothing changes. All of a sudden, you go 180. Well, we already know the money's very, very green.
You know, when he left Fox, Patrick Bet-David, you know, an Iranian Christian, Assyrian, Armenian, publicly put out
Try to hire him.
To hire him for $100 million plus equity. $100 million plus equity. That was the boldest hiring move I've ever seen. I got my own issues with Patrick, even though I am a fan and I go to his events and all of that stuff. But I thought that was a boss move. And I thought, man, if Tucker's got some brains, he's going to take this offer. This is a great offer. $100 million up front plus equity in what could be the greatest media company of all time if it had a big star like Tucker in it. But he didn't even respond to the offer.
I mean, somebody doubled that offer. And, the rumors are that, the Turkish government, Erdogan's got a fund that they put together, and they're getting money from Qatar and Iranian government to pay these influencers. And those are the rumors. Who knows what reality happened? But the truth is probably not far from the rumors.
So he didn't take that offer. He's in financial trouble. He takes offers from other people, although, we can't confirm this. This is just speculation on our part, but it's very likely speculation based on some actual valid concepts. And these so-called right-wing influencers, in my opinion, are not right-wing influencers at all. They are grifters. They're in the business for the money. Exactly. That's a grifter is a polite term for prostitute, right? So basically they were in this for the money. When the money for being a conservative and a truth teller wasn't good enough anymore, they shifted their point of view. The problem is that a lot of people that follow them have stopped following them. They don't have nearly the level of influence that they once did. Tucker Carlson's level of influence has cratered. Candace Owens's has cratered even more than his. And they're going to continue to crater because conservatives, right-thinking people, let me finish my thought here, who are right-thinking people are not going to follow somebody who changes their views 180 in a way that's antithetical to conservatives. Go for it.
Sorry to interrupt. No, I think you were absolutely right. But the way that I think President Trump says it, these people are always losers. They were never influencers. And President Trump kind of made them big. Like, Alex Jones was always a conspiracy theory. He was he was a crazy kook. Tucker Carlson didn't graduate college. It wasn't like he had all this, experience. Somebody gave him a chance and people kind of liked what he had to say. And now it's obvious that he's not being genuine. It's very obvious. I mean, he has to really try not to laugh or hold a straight face the things that he says, because that he doesn't believe in any of them. And another thing that's interesting, and by the way, Candace Owens, she can barely speak English correctly. I think she was a novelty that she was an African-American woman that was somewhat well-spoken and, would talk about conservative causes. And I thought, people think Republicans are racist. Republicans aren't. Republicans welcome people with open arms that when they come from other races, other religions, other cultures. And that was just, she was a novelty. But when you listen to her, she's just gone completely just off the hinges. And President Trump is right. Like, nobody really cared and gave these people credit and built them up on a pedestal. But, we're not stupid. We realize that somebody's paying you to say these things because we know they can't, it just doesn't add up, doesn't match with your identity a short time ago.
Absolutely. And the problem right now is that on the left, these folks, they don't have two brain cells to rub together to be able to come up with an original thought. Whatever they hear their overlords tell them they should think is what they end up thinking. And that's a massive, massive problem. I'm here in Canada, and I've been posting on social media saying controversial take, right? Iranians would rather see their country bombed than the Islamic Republic stay in power. And all these moronic leftists start piling up on me and saying, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Iranian people don't want to be bombed. And I go, of course they don't want to be bombed. They want the Islamic Republic and its agents and instruments of repression to be bombed. And they can't wrap their heads around the fact that the Islamic Republic is not the same as the nation of Iran. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times politicians, even smart politicians like President Trump or Pete Hegseth, accidentally, and by the way, me who was an Iranian American, I accidentally say Iran sometimes too. They fail to distinguish between the Islamic Republic and Iran and the people of Iran. Let me take a step backwards. Iran is a country that's been around 5,500 years. Iran, amazing people, amazing cultures, a culture mix of a lot of different people. The people that are running Iran today, or I should say the Islamic Republic today, they're not Iranians. They're foreign invaders, and they're using Iran's natural resources as a tool to expand this backwards ideology of an Islamic caliphate and grow it around the world. They've caused death and destruction. They're leading sponsor of terrorism in the world. And, all of Iran's natural wealth, all of Iran's oil money, gas money, everything that's getting built goes to an organization that's got two arms. It's a political organization, a terror organization called IRGC, and then a charity organization also called IRGC. And IRGC takes all this money and spends it on pain, misery, destruction, and terrorism around the world. The IRGC not only does not represent the people of Iran, it doesn't even have Iran in its name. People mistakenly think IRGC stands for Iran Republican Guard. No, it stands for Islamic Republic Guard Corps. So it's basically a bunch of foreign invaders that have hijacked the country, and these people are making decisions for the people of Iran. Araghchi, who's the prime minister, whatever his title is, he comes out and they said,
Foreign minister,
why do you have the internet cut off for 90 million people? Well, the answer is because they want to create genocide and they don't want any evidence of it. That's why they cut the internet off. But he says, I am the voice of the Iranian people. How can you be the voice of Iranian people when your name literally says Araghchi? You're from Iraq. You're not even Iranian. You don't even speak with an Iranian accent. You speak with an Iraqi accent. And then you're the voice of the Iranian people. It's just a shame. And people don't understand. The Iranian people are like frogs in boiling water. They know they're dead. They're willing to go on the street with no weapons and get shot at. They're willing to get bombed at every night, just to have a chance to potentially get rid of this regime. And by the way, I think it's going to happen. I think President Trump gets it. He's going to get rid of these crazy Islamists. There's about 900,000 to 1.5 million of them that just need to go. They're just no good. They have no home anywhere in the world because they're a death cult. And I think the way that he's doing it is through economic pressure. And I think they probably have 3-4 weeks of money left. And once the money dries up, they can't pay their mercenaries. It's going to fall apart. And President Trump knows that. And President Trump wants the Strait of Hormuz closed, even though he says, open the, gosh darn it, Strait of Hormuz. I'm not going to repeat what he said. But when he says that, it's just acting. He wants the Strait of Hormuz closed, but he knows that there's such lunatics. The leftists have such bad TDS, and the mullahs have such bad Trump derangement syndrome that they will do the opposite of everything he says. So he plays them like a flute. He wants the Strait of Hormuz to be closed to put pressure on the Chinese and the Europeans and Iranian Islamic Republic government, who, is generating $500 million a day from trade that's gone. And now when the money dries up, they can't pay those mercenaries from Iraq, those mercenaries from Syria, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. They're all going to go home, and it's over.
You're 100% correct. The strategy really has been to choke off the money spigot, so they're not in a position to defend themselves anymore, because they're starting to lose the rank and file in the Artesh that are not willing to fire on their own people anymore. Sure, some IRGC and Basij crazies still are, but for the most part, they've had to rely on these foreign mercenaries to repress the Iranian people. And these mercenaries are only going to stay there as long as there's money. Once the money's gone,
they're in the business of money. That's it. I mean, look at what happened. People say Iran is like Iraq, Iran is like Afghanistan. It's not. Yeah. And it's not like Syria, but the situation is very much like Syria. Iran is not Syria, but the situation, the way that Assad got beat us eventually is he ran out of money. He couldn't pay the mercenaries. They all went home. And it was just so anticlimactic. Like in one day, Syria just fell and, he went to Moscow. And that's the plan. And by the way, President Trump has also got that same plan in Venezuela. They just took out the leader. They didn't kill anybody else. There was no war. But Venezuela is acting, through the blockade, through pressure. Trump knows those pain points and how to play economic pressure. And that's the other thing. I think that a lot of presidents have made such a huge mistake. They always think that the economy and, foreign policy and wars and all of those things are completely compartmentalized. No, they're all related. Trump uses economic power and other leverages to put pain points on these people. And at the end of the day, this is not about Iran. This is all about China. And China wants to be the sole dominant superpower in the world. And Trump is finally the first president that has the cojones to stand up and say no.
Hell no. No and hell no.
And look at the unfortunately the Canadian government are trying to appease to China.
Ridiculous.
The 99 or 90% of Canada's population lives within 100 miles of the U.S. border. Canada is really in the business of doing trade with the U.S. If you cut out trade with the U.S., it's just stupid. Why would you want to go, to the hands of the Communist Party that all they want is your natural resources? They want to take over Canada if it's natural resources. And unfortunately, when President Trump says the 51st state, what he means is that if we don't bring Canada on our side, they're going to be a 51st state of China.
Let me put it to you this way. The people in charge of Canada right now are milquetoast Marxists. They don't know a damn thing about how to run a country effectively. And unfortunately, they're in charge. We need to, from within Canada, continue to fight for a great Canada, a glorious Canada, the type of Canada that we've always had. Because if we do that, I think Canada can be one of the most incredible countries in the world. But at the end of the day, until we get rid of Mark Carney and his illiberal party, we're in trouble. But let's switch gears. I think it's very important that President Trump understands something. There's no deal to be made with the Islamic Republic. There's no Delcy Rodriguez in the ranks of the Islamic Republic's leadership. Whoever's giving him that information is feeding him bad information. The only person the Iranian people want as their interim transitional leader is Reza Pahlavi, the Ala Hazrat, the Crown Prince of Iran. And I have to tell you this, his plan for transitioning Iran away from the Islamic Republic and toward a bright new future involves letting the people decide what type of government they have. In my opinion, what's going to happen when there is a plebiscite about that and the Iranian people get to choose what form of government they want, they're going to have a Saltanat Mashruta. They're going to have another constitutional monarchy. They're going to want Reza Pahlavi and the Pahlavi family at its head, because the Iranian people, the older ones like me, remember what Iran was like before the Islamic Republic, and the younger ones have something called the internet, where they found videos of Iran before the Islamic Republic, where they've seen videos of their former Shahanshah al-Yamir, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, speaking in Farsi to his people, speaking in French to French media, speaking in English to American and English media, and behaving like this ultra-sophisticated, incredible economic manager who took the country from 1941, when he came into power, to the time he left in 1979, and he raised the GNP by 100-fold. No country grew as fast as Iran did during his reign in the entire 20th century. He was the most effective national leader of the 20th century. If you measure effectiveness by how many people you pull out of poverty and you bring into a comfortable middle-class life, and by how much you increase the day-to-day lot of the average person. Shahanshah al-Yamir was the best and the greatest, and that's why I believe the people of Iran are going to vote for a constitutional monarchy. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree. I think first of all, what a shame that these imbeciles in European media say that Iranian people are not ready for a democracy. I mean, it's just so stupid. I mean, that tells you how
Racist comment.
I mean, racist. They believe Iran is their birthright, natural resources, and they want to destroy and keep our people down. First of all, Iran, women had the right to vote before many European countries had the right to vote.
Yep.
Our ancestors, Cyrus the Great, created the first cylinder of human rights before Europe even knew what human rights are. We're not ready for democracy. I mean, it just tells you this elitist, racist, backwards mentality. And by the way, these are the same people that would criticize the Shah about political prisoners. Barbara Walters would march and say, you guys have political prisoners and you're treating all these people wrong. Where all that media, have they ever criticized the Islamic Republic?
Not once.
No.
Not once.
The Iranian people are going to remember. I mean, unfortunately, Europe is done. It's finished. Europe is not a economic powerhouse it once used to be, and it's definitely not a military. So it's a has-been country, and all they have, or has-been continent, and all they have left is the remnants of their past. It's like, if you were trying to start a basketball team, you wouldn't pay Michael Jordan, $100 million a year for what he was able to do in the late 90s or in the early 90s. You would pay Michael Jordan zero right now because he's a has-been, and rightfully so. Well, Europe is a has-been. Europe at one point had its glories, and all the presidents previously think, well, we got to give Europe this respect for what once they were and what they're able to do. Well, no, they don't produce anything. They're far leftist. They're allowed radicalism to completely take over their continents, and they don't have the cojones to stand up to them. And economic, they don't produce anything. They're basically, buying everything from China and listening to these, even Russia, that we had to go protect them against. They're buying oil from Russia, financing the old war against themselves. I mean, it's the amount of mismanagement and stupidity in Europe is ballooned so much. But I hope whoever is working with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi on running the country from a constitutional monarchy, which I agree. I think it's definitely going to head towards constitutional monarchy. Whoever's running, I hope they have a long memory and they remember the governments, the countries that try to hold our people down, and they used this fake liberalism that they somehow that they care about people, but in fact liberalism is really racism, because these same liberals were out in the streets marching for Gaza. They refused to even acknowledge that 45,000 people had been massacred in Iran. And every time you talk to them, all they talk about is that school with 166 kids who, by the way, weapons were in them. To this day, we don't know who actually hit them. If it was Iran, if it was Israel, if it was the U.S. That's all they talk about.
The IRGC actually admits that they mistakenly hit that school. I've seen that. That came from the IRGC. Though those people are lying. Look, the left is made up of a bunch of lying liars who basically want to push a narrative forward. They don't care about truth. They'll lie about anything in order to virtue signal and in a performative way try to persuade as many people to come and see things their way as they can. But I got to tell you, Abteen, man, you are a rock star, brother. Really enjoy having you on the show. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing it with us. And I want you to just close off by giving the young men listening to this podcast a piece of advice about how to be a useful, strong, powerful young man in 2026. Go.
There was a video of a guy whose wife was being robbed. Him and his wife were being robbed. And this guy was such a worthless man. He allowed his wife to get beat up, and he sat there and watched. And that's a Democrat for you. A Republican man is, you have to, Jordan Peterson from your neck of the woods says something beautiful. A man has to be a monster, but being a good man means being able to control that monster where that monster doesn't come out unless it's absolutely needed. If you don't have that monster inside of you, if you're not a tough person that knows how to protect your woman, protect your children, protect the people in your tribe, in your community, in your house, then you're not a man. You're weak. And we don't need a future generation of weak men in this world. We need monsters who are gentlemen, who know how to control that monster inside of them and be a good person. But when it's time to go to war, when your wife is getting robbed by a bunch of hoodlums, if you stand up, if you just sit there and you watch your wife getting beat up, you're not a man. You're just a worthless member of society. A man is someone that's going to die for his wife and to make sure that nothing happens to his wife or his girlfriend. And we need more men like that. And this whole concept of being, foofy and I call them soy boys, that doesn't work. No. If you went to World War II, do you know the people that went to World War II? You know Ernest Hemingway was a war hero who went and killed a bunch of Nazis, and they came back and became a literary genius and wrote all these different poems. That's what men used to be. Men used to be tough. They used to go to war. They used to kill. They used to go hunt. They used to do all that, and then still had kept that monster in place and wrote literary pieces. But if you just do the literary pieces, and you can protect your wife, you can protect your family, you can let that monster out when that monster comes out, you're really not a man. And you got to remember that. We need men in society. We don't need weak people in society.
Amen. Brilliantly said. Abteen Vaziri, man, an honor to have you here, brother. Look forward to having you.
Honor is all mine. Thank you, Nikki. It's been a pleasure to be on.
No, man. So let's have you on the business podcast next, and let's you and I find some time and kick some butt. out there in the
Love
world.
that.
I'd like to find more ways of connecting and engaging with you. Thanks, brother. God bless you, man.
God bless you. Thank you so much for having me, and keep kicking butt.
Man, you know it. You know it. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.